I can't think of a single game that explores the folklore and mythology of the deep American South. This sent me down a rabbit hole of researching, and while there are a few games set in the deep South, I was validated in my original thought that there is nothing like South of Midnight. Compulsion Games have had 2 previous outings with Contrast and We Happy Few, both of which released to mixed reception. South of Midnight is undoubtedly unique, as I have just explained, but does uniqueness translate to quality? What's up? How's it going, people? Welcome to Casual Gaming Reviews. If you enjoy this content, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel. I spent 15 hours to finish my first playthrough and then another 5 hours to get the 100%, reviewed on Xbox Series X. South of Midnight is an action-adventure game where you take the role of Hazel, a 19-year-old aspiring track star. There are several difficulties and even a custom difficulty where you can adjust certain sliders. It is a game that has a mixture of combat and platforming sequences. The combat is reasonably basic and probably the game's weakest point, but it is definitely not bad. In fact, it continuously grows to become more enjoyable as the game goes on. Each combat section is an arena-style battle where you are locked into a fixed area and have to defeat a set amount of enemies to progress. You can use a basic attack which is mapped to one button in addition to a dodge, and then each enemy can be unraveled once defeated for a little health boost. That is the basic cycle of combat, but what I mean by it grows to become more enjoyable rests entirely with the skill tree and unlockable powers. The skill tree has general skills down the left, and then on the right it has boosts to your main powers. The powers are unlocked through story progression and then upgraded normally in the skill tree. The skill tree uses consumables you can find in the world called floofs, and there are more floofs out there than skill points needed, so you should be able to upgrade everything if you are vigilant with your exploration. The general skills give some boosts to combat prowess with things like a double dodge, a jump attack and an AoE attack, but the real burst of flavor comes from the skills. There is a push, pull, bind and possession. The push and pull abilities are useful against different enemies. For example, push can be used to blow exploding enemies into each other to cause a nice little personal grenade. Pull is useful against long-range enemies to bring you towards them or bring them towards you depending on size, and can even be upgraded to weaken enemies too. Weave is effectively a bind skill. It weakens and immobilizes enemies, which is useful in all scenarios. Last is the possession skill, which is cast by using our cute little companion Crouton. This is what it says on the tin and briefly will turn an enemy to your side. Personally, I thought all of these skills combined made the combat pretty enjoyable, but where it falls down is the enemy variety and combos. When you fought an enemy once, you've seen their entire moveset. The basic enemies, called Haints, only come in 6 forms, so the limitations to combat variety are clear here. South of Midnight does have grand boss battles, of which I thought were awesome in the first phase. Once you reach the second and third and sometimes fourth phases and you realize you are effectively doing the same thing again, the cracks start to show, which is a shame. It is worth mentioning though that the combat is completely skippable if you so wish. There is an option in the menu to skip all combat, so consider that if it's not clicking with you and you just want to follow the story whilst living in this beautiful world. It's not all combat though, and more of your time will be traversing the world through platforming sections. These parts also use your skills but passively. Push and pull can be used to move objects around, weave can be used to bring inanimate objects into existence, and sweet little Crouton can be used to get into those tight areas that Hazel can't. In addition to this, you get a double jump, a glide and wall running abilities. While none of this is difficult, it was definitely fun. South of Midnight never tries to challenge you with its platforming. I feel it exists more to make going from story beat A to story beat B extremely fun. Some of these sections really stick in my mind, like towards the back end of the game where you can get caught up in a wind stream. Gliding through a mountainous region with no complexity and no intense reactions just felt kind of freeing. And trust me, this game is heavy, so those moments were quite special. Where I would have liked a bit more challenge was in the Crouton sequences. Crouton has to burrow through some tight gaps in order to cleanse corruption, unlock doors, or just find floofs. These are extremely short areas, and given their length, it would have been nice to have a little bit more difficulty in the routes. Each chapter in South of Midnight follows a similar structure in that you cleanse a corruption in an area whilst learning about the people or person that has caused the corruption. This would then lead to a chase sequence in which the platforming comes into play. The chapter will then end or will lead to a boss fight. It is simple but very fulfilling, and honestly, these days I am appreciating these shorter experiences more and more. South of Midnight adopts an art style that is exceptionally striking. Characters look like they are carved out of clay or wood, which gives them this eccentric, rough-edged appearance. The standouts are without a doubt the mythical creatures. I won't step too far into spoiler territory here, but even just sticking with Catfish, who is all over the trailers, has this glistening burst of color that never failed to impress when on the screen. Look at him here. The design is just fantastic, from his deep gem-like eyes to his ribboned whiskers. The quality was met and even surpassed in some cases with the other mythical creatures, so I can and will gush endlessly about their designs. The game itself is animated in stop-motion style. It gives the experience of nothing else I've ever come across. While the game runs at 60 FPS on console, some aspects including Hazel and side characters are animated at around 15 FPS to capture the art style. This can be turned off for in-game activities if you don't like it, but it will always remain in cutscenes. I kept it on the whole time for my first playthrough and turned it off after when I was mopping up collectibles. It does of course feel smoother when it is turned off, but I did think it took something away from the game, which has been designed so well to be its own thing. In my opinion, Hazel's character design was incredible, but as a little bonus, she also gets 3 outfit changes throughout the runtime, all of which I thought were awesome. The last thing I will say about the visuals is that there is an area in the later game which stunned me with how it looked. Yes, I'm talking about you, Town on the Tapestry. If there is another thing that will be unforgettable when completing this game, it is the audio. The music is composed by Olivier de Riviere, who was the composer on both Plague Tales, Dying Light 2 and Vampire the Masquerade Swan Song. What he has managed to create here with the South of Midnight soundtrack is nothing short of a masterpiece. I implore each and every one of you to listen to this game's soundtrack, if nothing else. The music of course keeps in track with the rest of the game by staying true to the American South and its traditions, by incorporating a lot of country, jazz and blues. But what captures the attention most is that each mythical creature, each main character and each story beat has its own curated song. These ensembles have lyrics that tell the story or the actions of the creature or character you are dealing with. It's fantastic. There wasn't a single musical segment that I disliked, and I found myself bopping along every time. In addition to this, each weaving action Hazel does when traversing through the world has this beautiful melodic choir attached to it. The great audio design doesn't stop at the music itself though, as the voice acting is superb. Hazel is voiced by Adrian Ray, who I'm not personally familiar with, but oh my god, what a stellar job she did here. Catfish, voiced by Walt Roberts, is also exceptional and captivating when he is monologuing. In fact, every character, no matter how big or small, had great voice work and really makes you feel like you've been dropped in the dead center of a southern tale. Even if you hate this review, do yourself a favor and go and listen to the soundtrack now. Trust me, you'll love it. I was not prepared for how deep South of Midnight's story gets. Holy shit, it gets pretty dark. I had to stop a couple of times just to compose myself and process what I had just witnessed. At the heart of this game is the southern mythology, and Hazel, on her quest to find her mum, who gets washed away in a storm at the start of the game, discovers that she is a weaver. Weavers in legend are people with the ability to see the threads of the grand tapestry, the very strands that make up reality itself. This game portrays pain and sorrow as knots in these strands, which Hazel must heal so that people can be free of their suffering. A lot of the time, a requirement of mending these knots is for Hazel to learn the truth of the situation. South of Midnight explores themes of child abuse, murder, neglect, and self-destruction. It is by no means light-hearted. I did think it touched on these topics very well, and I was invested in the narrative throughout. All of the bosses draw inspiration from various folklore of the Deep South, and it was really interesting to look into this mythos after to see how Compulsion Games did their own original take. The story is condensed into 14 chapters, and it was very well paced except for the final chapter. While I do think South of Midnight ultimately ends in a satisfying way in terms of where the characters end up, I think it could have taken a slightly longer path to get there. The final chapter just kind of ends, and it took me by surprise a little bit. This is a very linear game, but there are some collectibles that I would consider side content. As I mentioned before, there are floofs to collect if you search around every corner, which you can use to upgrade your skills. There is also over 100 pieces of reading material, which quite nicely plumps up the story if you want to digest more of it. The best little bit of bonus content is the Codex, in which you can read about every character in the game, as well as lore of the environments, enemies, or bosses. I spent a lot of time in these menus just reading as I found it so interesting. The devs have really gone over and beyond with their research, and it really shows. South of Midnight is a completely distinct and specially crafted game. It is undeniably Compulsion Games' best title, and I would not hesitate to recommend this to anyone. Its short 15 hours runtime is packed with beautiful visuals, exceptional voice work, and has an unforgettable soundtrack that explores things I have not experienced before. The story and lore draws heavily from the Deep South, and it always stays true to its identity. The traversal is fun, but the combat is just good, not great. I would have liked some more variation in the boss fights, and the final chapter felt a little rushed. South of Midnight gets a casual gamer score of 8.5 out of 10. Check out my channel for more reviews, discussions, and spoiler casts. I have recently uploaded reviews for Atomfall and Citizen Sleeper, so glance at those if they sound appealing. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of South of Midnight. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to support the channel, and for everything casual gamer, keep it here. Peace and love.